Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Hello, everybody.
Welcome everyone to the podcast. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And welcome any newcomers to our podcast. We love having you on board, and to our Facebook group, which is increasing in numbers, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay. So it's great. And our topic today is about improving school results through a coaching approach to change. And we welcome Bobbie Cameron, who's a literacy consultant from Melbourne. Welcome, Bobbie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here with you.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you as part of this podcast, Bobbie, because like us, you're in the field. You're in schools.
In the thick of it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, Bobbie, can you tell us just a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. I studied at Melbourne University, and right back then I had a passion for literacy, so I completed honours specifically in literacy. Started teaching back in 2008 and worked my way up to leading teacher, focus on curriculum. Before becoming an assistant principal, again, the focus on curriculum was always there. And then in 2017, I started my own consulting business, primarily focusing on literacy, but also supporting schools with strategic plans and AIPs and the likes.
And, well, what have you been up to lately?
Good question. Well, amidst COVID, I've been surviving. No. My work varies a little bit. So I've got quite a network of schools in Victoria, which was where I was based. And with different schools, I do different things. So it varies from all things reading to vocabulary and spelling development to writing and building a knowledge of professional practice around the writing workshop. And mentor techs and, you name it. But really working with principals to develop a clear vision on what they want to achieve for their schools and helping that vision come to life. So that what that looks like, I suppose, is getting on a ground level with teachers and getting into classrooms and seeing what's happening and working with the staff to commit to change.
So usually the school knows some areas that they need to improve in. Is that the way they look at their results? And
yeah, generally when I'm employed or invited into a school, the schools have identified through the likes of their AIP and strategic planning areas of focus. And quite often they know that they need what they need to improve on. But the big thing is how. How are we going to commit to developing change and commit to sustaining change and improved outcomes, not just for students, obviously being at the forefront, but for staff, and how can that be maintained? So that's where I come on board and start to identify the nitty-gritties of what has been identified and really start to outline the way this can come to life.
So you've been part of the change in a number of Melbourne schools. And, just this week we've noticed that the results in Victoria are really fantastic in their NAPLAN results. Yeah. So, and you see that personally in your schools, you see improvement happen like a before and after?
Yeah, absolutely. The results were outstanding. It was so heartwarming to see that the hard work that schools are putting in pays off. For some schools that I started with in 2017, you wouldn't recognise them as the same the same schools, particularly in literacy as we're talking about today. But that's for not just, what I can offer and bring to the table, but it really, my hats go off to the staff at hand and the principals and the leadership teams that commit to this work. And clearly with the results, what we've seen over the last, be it 12 months with some of the newer schools, or if it's 4 years in, like I said, the schools are unrecognisable from teacher passion, commitment, knowledge, understanding, and how that translates into the classroom. It's worlds apart from some of when I stepped foot in the door many years ago into some of these schools. It's really, really exciting stuff.
So in this podcast, I reckon we'll unpack some of the things you do that make those changes and bring about those great results.
Mm-hmm. And Victoria prides itself on being the education state.
Yeah, they do.
I do have a chuckle when I see that on number plates and think, and how do we make that? We just say, right, we are the education state. But then when we do look at, each of the states in certain territories in South Australia do run on different models. And so I think it would be really, I'm really interested to for us to dig a little bit into what is the sort of model that Victorian Education Department has built. It is very much, when you're in schools, there is a team, isn't there, around that? You're not just going in, I'm not saying just going in. I'm saying when you go in, I know from and with the few Victorian schools I've worked with too, that you're immediately met by the team that's going to be working through this, and there's that real and so there is people resources and time resources that Victoria seems to put into that. So can you just give us a little bit of a picture of the Victorian model, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, I think the Victorian model has invested. There's a lot of money that goes into the Victorian education system, which is funneled through schools. Lower disadvantaged schools are very heavily supported. But from a school-wide perspective, it is very much about building a culture of collaboration and getting staff to commit really to being a team. And what that looks like, the principal will develop a team around them, assistant principals or deputy prins, leading teachers, literacy coaches, and they're really at the forefront of driving the principal's vision. There's a lot of time and energy that goes into supporting staff at a ground level through the likes of literacy coaches or learning specialists, as they're called now. And their roles are really to monitor consistency or lack of consistency in some cases, really work to get everybody on the same page. There's limited places to hide now in a school that is doing this well. When you get everyone on board and the vision is clear and the demand is there, you can't hide. You're either on board or you find a different ship. So I think that's basically the model, building autonomy, giving teachers the power to use their own minds, but not sway away from the school's overarching goals. There's freedom to explore, but there's also quite intense rigidity within a school that's operating really well. There's obviously things within the Department of Teaching and Education that you can't stray away from, but I think the beauty with the Victorian education system and at a school level is teachers are still empowered. I would hope. At least that's the avenue and the line that I take with the schools that I work on. I don't want to provide my schools that I am so lucky to work in with a one-size-fits-all model or program, because education is not a one-size-fits-all. And I think when you can start by working with a school and identify their specific needs, then that opens the door to movement. Yeah.
So when we look at you going into a school, what are some of the things, say you were doing something in vocabulary or spelling or whatever, what sort of what makes the approach different, I suppose, or or effective, I suppose.
Effective, yeah. Well, I touched before on that consistency, and one of the things that I find working with schools straight away is that there's a lack of consistency, and that's talking about improving results. As we mentioned before, Phil, one of the biggest things to success in terms of improving results is developing consistency. And I mentioned before of really getting everybody on the same page. So what I typically will do is go into schools, meet with the leadership team, hear what they have to say, look at their current reality, map out directions of or help them identify, where they want to be, and then look directly at a ground level, so that being in the classrooms, what is actually happening. Principals don't have time to get into classrooms and really see it firsthand for, to understand what is happening. They have a vision and they trust that vision is going to be executed. When staff are left to their own devices to do things without a clear vision, I suppose, being shared, that divides staff, and they start clutching at straws to do their own thing. So I guess finding out what's happening, finding out the level of consistency, bridging the gap, and getting, and that's about creating that demand of getting everybody on the same page. Working out then, almost working backwards by design. So here's our goal, and now here's some of the things that we can do. So on a typical day, getting into classrooms, running observations, providing timely, explicit, relevant feedback, and then shifting that to a modelled approach. So I will go in and model best practice, I hope, and all my work, it supports the work of the department as well. So making sure we hit the high impact teaching strategies and the likes, and then monitoring and supporting staff in a non-threatening and engaging, I hope, way to help execute their vision.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is, it's a consultancy / coaching kind of model where sometimes you're consultant, sometimes you're coaching.
Yeah.
You're empowering others that are leaders within the school to do that coaching as well. But you've noticed that is creating greater change than, say, a principal that just throws their hands in the air and says, I just need a program to fix all this, like.
That escalated into that space very quickly.
Yeah, it did.
Well, you put me on the spot there, Phil, but look, programs to me are like that pill that everybody wants to take. We're all on a journey to get fitter and healthier and stronger and, all that sort of stuff. And we would love to pop a pill to make us fitter, stronger, eat less, eat better, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it takes a tailored program, that suits you and your needs. So your body is different to the next person. Your school is different to the next school. People who, our clients, clients and community that make up the school varies from school to school. So a program assumes that everybody is the same.
Yep.
And we are not.
And every child is different as
Every
well.
child is different.
Yep.
And if you can teach teachers and, principals and leadership teams to be authentically responsive to their clientele, to the students within their school and their staff, then there's no need for a program. There is a need for consistency, but that is not through a program.
So when we talk
in
about,
my opinion,
so to get that consistency, I know Victorian schools are very conversant with a reading workshop and a writing workshop. Those are the types of routines that get that consistency going, is it?
Yes, yeah. So there's some, I suppose, for lack of better words, non-negotiables. And within that would be the likes of an instructional model. So to minimise the inconsistency across schools, it's part of the work that I've done in schools to support growth is by implementing things like an instructional model so that every teacher is able to work collaboratively with their colleagues to come up with meaningful learning intentions, to come up with explicit success criteria, to set the students up for success, to execute meaningful and relevant mini lessons, using the tools at hand like quality mentor texts, developing skill sets to pull apart what's in a mentor text and analyse, the reading elements or writing elements within, and then really empowering students to take that back to their own work. By something like that, the kids get the skill sets, but they can apply it to their own learning.
Yeah, because Sharon, we're often on about applying our learning in our own reading and writing,
Yes.
which we see as a really important part.
Authentic application. Through that engagement with that explicit explanation and demonstration in the mini lesson, that we know what actions to take as a reader or writer.
Yeah.
So whether we're 4 or whether we're 24, we just entered university level, but we not only need to see how it's done, but know how to do it for ourselves. And that's that. We're on that track again. Sorry, I think I just hijacked it. I just had to have my say again.
Because I know when all the years I've been teaching, I rarely had someone come into my classroom and help with coaching, or it's just something that we've really fended for ourselves over many years, trying to get things going. And so then we would latch on to, what's the teacher doing next door doing? And but there's been. And then, as you say, principals don't necessarily, they've been out of the classroom for a while, so they're not sure.
They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
In the same way staff. But, I mean, that still happens, Phil, and that's interesting you touch on that because, if I rewind to 2017 when I did start with some of my schools that I continue my partnership with, that's exactly what was happening. And, in schools we have... they're transient populations. Teachers come and go. So you're always trying to, you fast forward to the beginning of next year, and if you've got 6 or 8 staff leaving, then you've got 6 or 8 staff that aren't on the same page potentially. So you're always, trying to work towards getting people on the same page. For me, that's crucial. And eliminating, this is what I've done in the past and this is what my colleague next year is doing, and bringing it back to building teacher knowledge and awareness of what's best practice. And best practice pedagogically, not this worked for me last year with my classroom.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And it's building that, it's actually building the page, isn't it, with a school, that what is on the page here that, and when I come in, these are the pedagogical underpinnings that mean that I can team and be collaborative with others in the school instantly about where we're going, how we do that, and those consistencies can start building internally as well as with that coaching and consulting kind of support around it. New people in at least know where they're trying to get to. Each page looks a bit different in schools, but there's definitely elements that schools are absolutely driving down in there.
Absolutely.
So all those wonderful things you talked about, like how do you use a mentor text? How do you, that becomes part of their
diet.
The diet and the business, and the authenticity of teacher is working out how to get good at teaching in those ways. But here we're talking more about the page is looking like an approach. It's looking like a framework of learning.
Yeah.
With in Victoria's case, the Victorian curriculum.
Yeah.
Guiding and giving content around that, but then really the coaching is about the not so much, it's still content driven, but it's more about what tools and routines and strategies we're using to get our students using
and then
those effective.
And then that's consistent across the school as well.
Yeah.
So we're all on the same page, but there's great variation in, lots of things a teacher will do in lessons, but there is that consistency. An instructional model gives that, doesn't it? An instructional model really brings out the professionalism of the teacher in making really powerful decisions about what they're doing, using authentic texts and so
we know the framework being the instructional model that's that's working towards developing the consistency. So it becomes an expectation and just a way of being within these schools that I've been a part of, for example, that we know that whatever lesson we take, we have to follow the instructional model.
Yeah.
But unpacking that, behind that, there's still autonomy in what you can deliver.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that for me, one of the biggest things that I hope that I never do is strip teachers of their autonomy and their ability to develop their capacity to deliver quality lessons.
Yeah. And based on those students sitting in front of them.
Yes.
And that's the exciting bit.
Yeah.
If no one else can see this, but we can see, Bobbie's huge smile on that. Yes, it's always, because that's what it's about. It's about those children sitting in front of us.
Yeah.
And so year by year, school by school, where we are, it's those children who really drive the
everything we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you go into a school, Bobbie, and it's the first time you've been there, how long before you see changes, dramatic changes in what's happening?
Oh, gosh, that would have a lot to do with how often you're there too.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky. I have a great partnership with my school. So I'm there quite frequently, which is key. I can talk about that later, but it's a good question, Phil, because sometimes, the biggest thing and the fastest thing that I see change is teacher attitude, and of course that translates to student attitude and engagement. So when I go into a school and say I'm working on writing, and I'm a huge advocate for the 6+1 traits of writing, and within that unpacking the crafts that lie within. When I come to a school, that can be quite confronting. I'm working with teachers that are in their 20s, so brand new to the profession. And then I'm also working with teachers that are in their 60s and have a wealth of experience and knowledge, but have perhaps never heard of the traits. Sometimes I'm faced with, I guess it all comes down to fear, fear of the unknown. When we think we've perhaps mastered our craft of teaching and we're faced with something that is new, that can be really, really overwhelming. I guarantee, and this is a big call, I guarantee that if something like this is new to you, your life is better for it. So I'm going to say as short as 2 weeks, if a teacher is dedicated and brave enough to get into the sandpit and trial what I'm, advocating and not selling. You know, I would love to be making money off the likes of Ruth Cullum and Jennifer Saravello. What I believe in, and if they can put themselves in the sandpit and just play with it, I mark my words, they will come back to me a fortnight later and say, wow, I wish I was doing this stuff 20 years ago, 5 years ago, last year in my first year of teaching. So that's the biggest and fastest change that I see. Teacher attitude and, of course, student engagement.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
And results.
Results, you know, that like there's this misconception, I think, that results, you know, we always talk about analysing data and it takes 5 years to see change and everything. I see change in data within, you know, for some children, keeping in mind education isn't a one-size-fits-all model, in a month. You know, there's students who, if they've never considered meaning when reading, and a teacher learns to say, does that make sense? Did it sound right? Does it look right? And the child can then apply that to their learning. Within a month, they're a different child. They've approached reading differently. They've got a better attitude. They actually understand why and what they're reading. And, of course, you see their results grow. And the same way as if a child has been writing for, you know, if they're in grade 6 and they've spent 5 years, 6 years writing in school, but they've never had a purpose, and suddenly now you've shown them authors that are beautiful. You know, I'm so passionate about children's literature. If you can teach children to get into that text and pull apart and learn from that author, which they can and they do, within, you know, as short as 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they are a different writer. They read like a writer, they start to write like a writer. So the results are very quick. From a whole school perspective, like, look back on the results in 6 months' time, it's a different school. 12 months' time, it's out of the water. You know, it's really exciting stuff. Yeah.
But as you say, it requires everyone to get on board, doesn't it, really, too?
Yeah. Which, you know, I, like you can tell probably by my geeky smile and things, but I'm very passionate about that, and that passion is pretty infectious. And if you're not if you're not buying or picking up what I'm putting down, then I will chat to you, and you know we talk about it.
Yeah.
Something I think that's sometimes not understood in classrooms is the importance of the independent practice, the plenty of time to write, plenty of time to read, but it's focused on a particular strategy or skill or whatever, but often there's not a mini lesson, it's more of a maxi lesson. And
get off the stage.
Yeah. Do you? Is that something that you try to work on early, or is that?
That's a huge focus, and that's one of the most trickiest parts of the job, is to get teachers off the stage, because teachers have, like I said before, a wealth of knowledge, but the way to impart that on children is not to stand up and talk for 45 minutes, but to gather. You know, I think Di Snowball phrases this as digestible chunks. Is it Di?
I'm sure she has said it, but I don't know whether it's her alone.
Well, probably a mix, but I say that too. Honing in on digestible chunks. You know, we're working with children, and adults alike find things difficult if you're just talking at them. We all, humans, children, adults, elderly, we all need time to practice when there's new information. And the more time that you can provide children with that time to practice, the better. So mini lessons, you know, that's an art in itself, the art of mini lessons, finding something purposeful that the children can implement in their independent practice. Not less is more in a mini lesson. You know, you don't have to achieve everything in one go. The curriculum is so overpacked. We can't achieve everything to 100%, you know, perfection within there. So pinpointing and breaking down things that you can really fine tune in a mini lesson and give the time that it deserves.
That's such a good.
But still, covering the elements of the Victorian or Australian curriculum in as broad a way as you can, but then honing in on that particular strategy or skill. Yep.
And I think that that just really takes me back to that sometimes we forget that mini lessons aren't just standalone, they're a series.
It's just a series, 100%.
You know, it's a, yes, you know, that it isn't, well, you know, 5 to 10 minutes doesn't give me enough time to do everything in this mini lesson. Well, and neither should it. We need mini lessons every day.
Every day.
And so we keep building on. It's the series. It's not just so it's not the whole series in one day. It's the series over a number of days. And I think that's sometimes that's the shift that has to come in thinking around how do I fit it all in? Well, you fit it in over time rather than...
Fit it in over time and look for connections within the curriculum.
Yes.
You know, you can't have reading without writing. You can't have writing without reading. You can't have mathematics without literacy. You know, literacy filters through to every single topic there is in the curriculum. And when we really pull apart the curriculum, there are so many crossovers. So working smarter, not harder.
Yes.
You know, when you've given yourself permission to slow down a little bit, and find those connections, it gives you a route to exploring it in a much more meaningful and richer manner. It also gives you the time to respond to students. You know, it takes away from the focus of teaching and saying comments like, we've taught that, the kids should know it, and shifts that from, we've taught it, but have they learnt it? You know, if the answer is no, they're still struggling with it, then you haven't done it justice. And so why move on to something else?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
The other thing I see sometimes is a teacher putting their class into fixed groups that they rotate to different activities each day. Seems to be something that a lot of teachers revert to try and cover what they want to cover. How do you tackle that one?
Well, in literacy, I try to move teachers from that model. If there's a focus on, I really don't like the term activities. I'm just going to put that out there right now. The teachers I've worked with will be laughing because I just don't like it. To me, activities is free play. You know, and free play serves its purpose in terms of learning. But in a rigorous curriculum, there's no time for free play, you know. So when I'm going to say the tasks are purposeful through groups, in reading, that task must be reading. In writing, the task must be writing. If we expect students to improve their reading and writing abilities, the only feasible way that they can do that is to have time to read and write. An activity, word work, you know, letter matching, sound matching serves its purpose in context, different context to the reading block. In reading, kids have to be reading. So a group work, I will allow teachers to do group tasks if every group is reading in that independent reading block time of the instructional model. So for a prep class, like teachers will have a heart attack when I say in the instructional model it's expected the time frame 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the timetabling of the school, that children will be reading. You know, they have a meltdown. That doesn't mean 40 minutes of sitting with the one book. We're talking 4, 5s and 6-year-olds.
Yes.
So I will encourage groups to happen, but it is not activities, it's purposeful reading. So 5 minutes with big books, for example, that the teacher has already explored. Yeah. Moving to 5 or 7 minutes, again, depending on the time fractions within the school, on take-home readers. Moving on then to 5 to 7 minutes of levelled readers within the classrooms, you know, texts that the kids can cope with. And then 5 or 7 minutes for reading for enjoyment by going to the classroom library, or, you know, if your school's fortunate enough to have a classroom library. I can't stress the importance of those, but that's another topic. Or just having books for the love of it that they have access to. So with all of that group work, or the, I'm going to say in inverted commas, activities there, you can see that the focus is on reading. And for me, that is absolutely crucial.
Yes, yeah. And if we took one part out of that word activities that we do like, that's being active.
Yes, yeah.
It's being active as in the very process that we want them to grow in.
Yep.
And in reading, that active process is
Reading.
and the active process in writing is writing.
Yep.
So, yes. And so just by describing what you've described there as, you know, all of those opportunities to be in a prep reception class for the 4 or 5-year-olds, they can be active as readers in many different ways.
Yep.
And that's what we want them to. There's those opportunities to be active in familiar text, opportunities to be active with the just right text for us, ways to be active with books that we just want to explore and choose to reread or open up and go, okay, what's here for me? So that's such a great way to explain about this piece about being active within
the activity.
within the process,
Yeah,
you know,
engaging in the process.
Yeah.
Mm.
I know this was a while back, but I just wanted to go right back to when we were talking about, you know, when you're first in a school, there's something that I think really I wanted to draw out there, and there's a big piece about that because I notice this a lot when working with teachers in schools, and it's about building relationships and having a really trusting relationship with each other, and not just trust but respect, I guess, for each other, respecting what teachers are bringing to this. And so I kind of wanted to explore this a little bit further, I suppose, because there'll be lots of people who are in coaching and leading roles in schools that will be thinking, you know, about this, to respect a teacher and the way they're working, but to open some doors on thinking. There are some tools that we probably draw on as coaches about that, and you started talking about some of those, but I reckon we could expand that a little bit more. And that really is to, I think the first thing that you said was about, you know, going into a classroom and just knowing how a classroom works. And that when we're working with people, it's not about, well, everything's a disaster here, because it isn't. But knowing where we can start making a shift on that. And I suppose when there is a focus in a school already, you know, what we're trying to work on, and maybe it is, let's say it's an instructional model, that we're just we're focusing on one thing at a time. And that then another thing that you talked about is that once we know how that works, that we can demonstrate and model those things. But respectfully, because it isn't just the coach arriving
at all.
And going, okay, now this is what it's going to look like. But so just talk a little bit more about sort of that process that you know works so effectively because it isn't just the modelling, because then there'll be debrief and then there'll be, so talk a little bit more through that process of, I suppose, some of those strategies that you know are effective for building that.
That others could use.
That others could use, and that are effective because it does bring about that change.
I guess it does come back to that digestible chunks. You know, as a coach, to take away that idea and really have that in the back of your mind all the time is crucial. Phil mentioned before, you know, when he was in a classroom that, it was a closed door policy. You shut the door and you did whatever you really wanted to, you know, and then you left. But now, you know, schools are shifting to an open door policy. People can pop in at any time. Your coaches can come in, consultants can come in. Tours are happening within a lot of schools. You know, it really is an open door policy. With that being said, there are still plenty of teachers, and I was one of them, that got really nervous when I had a coach or consultant coming in, because it was that preconceived idea that they're going to diminish my practice and the art that, you know, you invest so much time in creating, and devalue what, you know, all these things that I'm trying. But that's really not what it's about. You know, I see myself, I'm a teacher, once a teacher, always a teacher. And, you know, you can have, your title can change, but you don't really. So to go into a classroom as a consultant or as a coach, you are still a colleague. And spending time to get to know, you know, the colleagues that you're working with, time to build their confidence, work with their strengths and support their weaknesses in the same way we would children. You know, I'm not about going in and, diminishing your work. I'm there to build you up and support you, and as you are me, you know, like I guarantee I take away as much as you hopefully do when I work with you. So starting with something small, well, seemingly small, like a learning intention, and really knowing the why. Why are they so important? How do we develop them, and how do we share them with the students? That would be one thing that I would work on first of all. If we can get that right, the rest of the lesson follows. From there, that then allows you to deconstruct things that happen in the mini lesson. You know, are there areas of the high impact teaching strategies that can be strengthened? Are there ones that you could share with colleagues that you're, you know, so proficient in? So finding both strengths and, I'm not going to say weaknesses, but you know, help me out.
Areas to grow in.
Growth.
Growth points.
But yeah, just having that mindset that we all are learners. And sure, I might be able to point you in the direction of wonderful readings and, you know, different pedagogies and everything. But at the same time, I'm no different to, you know, we help each other.
Yes, yeah. And I like that term that one of the principals that I've worked very closely with, you know, we talked about for every teacher in the school or every part of the team in the school, that really the coaching is so personalised. And I think that's its real strength, that it isn't just whilst we're talking about consistency, it doesn't take away from like where we are in our learning, and we can and just like a good mini lesson will do, good coaching will also mean that we can find the place and for teachers, once that relationship's built, for them to really say, so this is where I'm having this is where I want to grow.
Yeah.
This is and don't you just love that when it just comes straight from there? It's this open. You are like the personalised coach in that sense, or the personal. What is it in fitness? Personal trainer.
Yeah, personal trainer. Yeah.
And so that's what I think gets so exciting about the coaching work, is when we're not seeing it as I have to lay out the same thing for everybody. It's this wonderful dance with everybody, isn't it? You know, so this is what will help us get to that. This is where I want to grow. This is what's not working for me, or this isn't working for this group of children. How do I, you know, so all of those layers can come into it more. And it's just such an efficient way, isn't it? You know, spending time one-on-one with teachers or in those small group settings, the learning, it's such rich learning that can be done when it's, and I suppose that's where I want to just go that little bit further into, we can model in classrooms, and that's an important element of coaching. But yes, the discussions, having time in that day that we're in classrooms to talk more with the teacher, or if it is when we're on our feet in that room, to be quite, to keep that conversation really focused around that, or, how we see children respond, and us all having eyes on that too. So the feedback loop is just happening really strongly and powerfully and organically.
I think that's the clincher. When I started, consulting, I always had a formalised block throughout the day to follow up with the staff that I'd worked with. Yeah. And during the session, I was beginning my journey of consulting and whatnot. I sort of did my thing and they did theirs, and then we'd come together and we'd have a discussion about it. But now it didn't, thankfully, take me too long that I realised that the discussion does need to be organic. So in a modelled or a observation even session, if there's questions, ask. It is a partnership, and we're there in the moment, much like a friendship. You're not going to wait until an hour down the track to run off a series of questions you had. The conversation just flows.
Yes.
So, I guess that comes back to rapport, but knowing that that's a safe place to engage in those rich and sometimes challenging discussions, on the spot that often require feedback, like follow-up later on.
Yeah.
But opening up to that happening on the spot.
Yes. Yeah. And how often do you find that then there's the walk and talk? We're all heading
constantly.
back to the don't you just love that? And you think, this is your break time. It's the recess or lunch, and it's like, no, I just wanted to ask about, or did you notice, or did I'm me not driving the conversation necessarily. I just find that
hearing
the teachers just
stories.
Yes, and they've got so much to share.
Yeah.
And so much you really do become part of their teaching life in that way.
One of my favourite things, and this touches back on what you asked before, Phil, like when do you notice growth or, results or change? One of my most favourite things in the day is those incidental moments where you're walking across the playground and it's either a child who comes up to you and says, Miss Cameron or Bobbie, can I show you my work? Or when are you in our class next? Because they're dying to show you what they've written.
Yes.
In the same way, teachers will email me constantly, daily almost. I'm getting emails saying, have a look what so-and-so did. They were a reluctant writer when I got them this year. Or and just to feel that energy and the growth and the passion coming through, it's priceless.
Yes. Yeah. And so coaches can really build that as there's these things to build in, even if I know in many schools there might only be it might be a day a week as a coach in schools. That's probably...
Yeah, it depends. In Victoria, they have different models. So sometimes the learning specialists are full-time, and then others, depending on budgets and the size of the school, they might have a shared teaching load. So it might be a day or two out of the week that they're acting as a coach. Yeah. But for me, going in, it's usually on the weekly, if not fortnightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the frequency that you mostly have in schools? Is it weekly or?
Yeah, generally weekly. So it varies depending on the school's needs, budget, all that sort of stuff. Sometimes I'll go in for a series of curriculum days or after school workshops and the likes to really deliver the same message to everybody at the same time. But with that, I'll incorporate modelling where the staff act as my students basically. Yeah. But generally it's a week to week commitment.
Another question I was going to ask was about working with a school over a number of years and embedding what's going on. Is that you notice that's longer term, isn't it? Too.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot of time to see new learning embedded. Like I said before, the transient nature of schools for students and teachers in some settings. But quite often when I've had the schools that I started working with in 2017, which I've continued the work, we might have done 18 months to 2 years with a explicit reading focus. And when we actually delve into developing and implementing a rich reading framework to the whole school, that takes a lot of time. You've got your instructional model, but within the instructional model, you've got elements of the mini lesson. In that, then you've got your independent reading, and you break down independent reading to your guided or your teacher targeted teaching groups, to your goal setting, to your conferencing. So this is, a series, a big body of work. And then 10 teachers leave. And so you might continue that for the following year. Then, when we go back to the strategic plan or your annual implementation plan and the likes, you've realised that it's literacy as a whole. So then you have to then shift the work to writing once you feel that reading is embedded. So the work is it's never ending, but
it all requires effort.
It does, and continuous effort.
And you just got to keep at that. Yes, because I was going to say there is a tendency in some settings now to have a scripted program where you read out your script.
Yeah, that's that for me that takes away from teacher autonomy, and I said before that's one of the biggest things that I will go above and beyond not to do. So I pride myself and my ability on being able to build your knowledge and practice. Script just doesn't cut it for me, because you take away that script and what are you left with? Nothing. So that for me is just a outright no.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, I think a lot of teachers would say it strips them away.
Oh, they're bored.
Yes.
And if my rule of thumb, I say it all the time, daily, to all of my colleagues, if you're bored, rule of thumb is times that by 10. The kids will be bored out of their brain. There is a place for a script in the likes of Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking testing, because the purpose is different. You're trying to streamline and deliver a test. In terms of classroom practice, though, if you're reading off a script, how are you responding authentically to your students' needs and to your student as a human? If I sat here and responded to your questions that you're asking me and I had a script in front of me, the script might not have anything to do with what you've asked me. So, it's immediately for me inauthentic.
Yes.
Which I just don't like.
Well, because we know it's not effective.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there schools that struggle more than others in terms of schools that you work in, or?
Of course, but you can't sort of pinpoint to one thing. I think there's, and I get quite passionate about this, there's a huge misconception that schools with a high number of or a high percentage of EAL learners will struggle. Now, for me, that's just not the case. I've got so much data across so many schools where that is just not a feasible argument.
Agreed.
Yeah, if you give these students, no matter where they are, where they've come from, what their background is, if we give them time and, multiple exposures, opportunities to learn, they learn. Going in with the mindset that schools of a high nature in EAL populations won't achieve, to a certain standard, you're taking that opportunity from these students. There's all sorts of elements that come into play, like class sizes, location, you can't deny socioeconomic backgrounds and all that sort of stuff. But if you're committed and you believe that your teachers can teach and learn and that your students can and will learn, that's at the forefront.
Nothing's stopping you.
Nothing's stopping you.
No.
No. But that's a belief. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What makes your favourite principal?
Oh, my favourite principal. Do you know, I fantasize sometimes about being a principal. My favourite principal, or I guess what makes a good principal. Is that's essentially what you asked me. Okay.
A favourite one.
I'm not going to name.
No.
I was just going to say.
I'm
treading on.
I'll rephrase that to what makes a good principal. Yeah, okay. So in my opinion, principals that put teaching and learning at in the forefront of their school. Principals that are willing to get their hands dirty. Principals that are willing to allow and provide autonomy to staff. There is another misconception that when you're working towards consistency, you're stripping staff. It's not a cookie cutter model. It's not a one size fits all. The framework doesn't waver. The teaching practices are more aligned, but the delivery, for example, the text that you choose, what you highlight and what you get out of texts and whatnot can change. A principal that has a clear vision and that is committed both like from a financial aspect, from human resources to physical resources, committed to supporting staff to achieve their vision. There are a couple of things. I could keep going.
That's good. That's fair enough. And I suppose it'd be similar for what would make a good teacher. There's similar things to that, isn't there?
Yeah, commitment to learning and an openness to learning. And I always say what's not done what's not done today will be there tomorrow. If you didn't achieve it, don't stay at school till 7 o'clock at night. It's going to be there tomorrow. Come in. If something failed, don't beat yourself up about it. The kids are, really, they're none the wiser. They would have got something out of it anyway. Go in with a fresh mind the next day with an openness to learning and start again. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bobbie. I think it's been just so insightful. And thank you, Sharon.
Well, thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's been fantastic. Now, we do end up with some rapid-fire questions at the end, but we'll see how we go.
All right.
But we'll see how we go.
See how we go.
Oh, sorry.
You just don't
they might not be rapid there.
No. I'll start again. And now we'll go on to our rapid-fire questions, which sometimes aren't rapid. How do you think you learned to read?
Oh, I often think about this. I think I learned, it was a long time ago now. I'm getting old. No. I learned to read by watching my parents, by listening to my parents every single night for as long as I can remember. Mum or Dad would read to me. They would read with me. They would listen to me read. And they genuinely had a love of reading. It was just something we did. In terms of the nitty-gritties in the classroom, we had things that we have now. We had things that are different. But for me...
That was the biggest impact.
That was the biggest thing. And the biggest thing that I remember. Yeah. Being... my parents showing a love of literacy.
Yeah. And isn't that just so interesting? Like that, I
Which
think
is what
that
a teacher
comes
could
up
do
again
too.
and again, isn't it? That's out of all the things, it's about that joy and that love of it that we link to when we're seeing people enjoy it so much. And I want to do that.
I want a piece of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So absolutely for classrooms.
What's your favourite book as a child?
I'm going to say Winnie the Witch.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Don't need any explanation.
No, just Winnie the Witch.
Yep, that's fine. So, Bobbie, what's your favourite book at the moment?
Actually, one that never wavers for me is Maribyrnong Walks by Jane Yolen.
Okay. When do you best like to read?
Of a night time.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And good tips for parents in helping children with reading?
Read. Just read to them.
Yep.
Read. There's never a right or a wrong time. But I think, like for me, much of my childhood was, well, at least every single night without fail was spent before I closed my eyes, my parents would read to me.
Yep.
So don't get too hung up on what you should or shouldn't be doing, but make sure you're providing or allocating time to read to and with your children.
Okay. Exciting, wondrous parts of your career.
Exciting, wondrous parts of my career. Exciting seeing other teachers develop a love of literacy and sharing that love with their students.
Yep. And the more they know, the more they love it.
It's endless. You
Yep.
can never stop learning.
Yep.
Yep.
Any favourite recent story at a school or at home about a child or a teacher?
Just having teachers reach out to me, even if our journey has come to an end, I suppose, through consulting with a school, or a teacher has perhaps moved on to another school where I'm not consulting, having teachers still reach out to me to share work their students are producing as a result of their teaching is just soul soothing and heartwarming and all of those things. I can't get enough of that because it's so exciting for the teacher, but for these little humans. Yeah.
And often they take that practice to their new school.
Yeah.
And they keep that going.
Yeah, they spread the word.
Yeah, which is great.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's great to have you on board with us. And please join us on our Q Learning website. Contact us through that. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Download our podcasts and read our blogs. And you will be kept up to date with what's happening. The Teachers Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to lots of top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning, and we hope we've done that for you today. Thanks to everyone that was with us today, Sharon and Bobbie. Thank you. Thanks everyone for a great podcast. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Bobbie, and bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.